Hey Addicts, welcome back to another movie review and discussion. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be talking about 2018's The Predator. Now this is going to be more of a kind of spoiler discussion. I'm still going to have a rating for this movie, so if you want to just listen to my rating, you can skip to the end of the video, but I'm just going to be going over my thoughts, both good and bad, about this movie. This is a very mixed bag for me, so we're just going to jump right into it. So giving you an idea of what the plot is. The plot is a very jumbled mess, I can't lie. We start off with seeing some conflict with the Predators in space. We get to see one ship getting chased by another one and seemingly taking out the one that's getting chased, engines out, and then them warping to Earth and then crashing there, which then we get to see flashed into Earth. We get to see our main guy. I can't remember the actor's name off the top of my head, but he's the guy that played the villain in Logan. And he is this sniper that is on a special ops, and he gets to witness the ship's coming down towards him. He gets out of the way, sees the ship crash, and thinking that, the higher-ups of the government are going to be on their way soon, he decides to take some evidence of the crash to prove his innocence later, which I would say that is pretty quick thinking, because the government would probably burn you in that kind of situation. But anyway, so we get to see him take a couple of items, such as the Predator's wrist gauntlet and mask, that were just left in the ship for some reason, because the Predator is in the trees at this point, and he proceeds to take out all of his crew. He gets away by using a stealth it's like a ball. Like, I've never seen it in the Predator series before, but it's basically a ball that can turn him, activate his cloaking. And so he gets away. The government is able to come and kidnap the Predator that had crash landed. And we get to see, it's really weird from this point on, because we get a scientist in the mix of things. We get to see him eventually get picked up by the government and, enlisted into this loony bin group of discharged soldiers, or mentally discharged soldiers. And then we get to see his son, who, it doesn't really specify what kind of disability he has, but he has some kind of disability. There's a joke that is made about Asperger's in the movie, so I'm not sure if that's what he's supposed to have, but I'm not going to try to pick, because I don't want to, say the wrong thing. But he does have some kind of disability that we know of, but he's presumably portrayed as being gifted in a sense, being able to remember things and figure out certain equations. And so we get to see him get the Predator gear, which was mailed by his father through a way that they show how he mailed it, but they didn't really specify how he got to that location. But anyway, and then, things come off to where the Predator breaks out of the facility, and he's chasing after the group to get back his equipment. And there's this whole plot line where there's just, like, the smaller Predator, I guess what people are labeling him as the fugitive Predator, has like a package that's supposed to help humanity against the Predators, and there's another Predator that's chasing him, and he's the hybrid Predator. And apparently, from when you go in, you see that the Predator, race has been collecting trophies, not for the sake of trophies, but for the sake of getting their DNA to inject themselves with. And the whole thing is that they believe that the humans are slowly getting to the point where they're going to be extinct because of all the stuff going on in the world with global warming and stuff like that. And so the fugitive Predator brings them this to help prevent the human race from extincting, which it doesn't really say. There's no rhyme or reason why the fugitive predator has this kind of motivation to help the humans. I guess it's maybe just to let their species live on so they can continue hunting them. But then again, it kind of shifts the predator's fundamental basis of not hunting for sport, but hunting to improve themselves. So if they've already gathered the DNA, I don't know. But they have some weird thing for that because they think that his kid with the disability is supposedly the next step in human evolution. And so they're like, oh, I guess we'll take him because he's somehow going to have better genes. I don't know. It's really weird. But I made a few notes going through the movie, and there's just some things that, were good or bad. The one thing that I noticed right off the bat was the kid and the use of his disability. It's really weird because kids are really tricky in movies to get done right. It's really hard to make them fundamental to the plot without making them annoying. And while I don't necessarily hate all kids in movies, this movie I don't really see any reason why there was supposed to be a kid, and so that was a little bit that kind of was like that's the first strike. But I kept open mind because they're like, maybe they'll do something interesting, and it wasn't really, I don't know, because he wasn't annoying in the fact that he didn't have many speaking lines. He didn't say much throughout the movie, and what he did say wasn't cringy or anything, but it was just the fact of how prevalent he was to the plot that just made it seem stupid and unbelievable. The other thing was there's a lot of jokes in this movie, and some of them hit and some of them miss. I actually did like some of the banter between the military army guys. Because that's something that's pretty realistic. If you have somebody that is a family member that's in the armed services or knows somebody, they have that very brother camaraderie, even if they didn't serve with them. They have that kind of atmosphere about them. So I actually liked that. I liked seeing them joke around. At times, yes, it felt a little too much, especially in some scenes where they're trying to keep it serious. And so, I would say when you first get introduced to him, I like it. I thought that was okay. When you see it a little bit later on, like specifically in there's a hotel scene, that is a bit over the top, in my opinion. On top of just regular jokes, there's actually a lot of references, which they're references to the previous movies, but more as like a meme than anything. Like, they get the whole Arnie thing, like, get to the chopper! And like, they do stuff like that, or, Olivia Munn's character, like, when she first sees the Predator, you're like, you're a beautiful mother effer, and, the original Predator is like, you're one ugly MFer. So, I don't know, it's just, I don't know. I think it was done in a way that it made it feel more spoof than just homage. And so, I don't know. It's like they were trying to have fun with it, but they had too much fun in it in the final product, at least to me. There was a couple other things, like there's a lot of plot details that, I don't know if you necessarily call them plot holes, but it's just kind of like, well, they kind of are plot holes, but they're just kind of like, where did that come from? Like, for instance, there's an instance in the movie where they get out of the military custody and they're with the group of the discharged soldiers, and they're going back to the main guy's house to get his son in the Predator gear. When they don't find him there, they end up getting some weapons they had in the house, which I find fine because they showed him with like a hunting rifle and like a standard AR. But there's a later scene played right after that where they're fighting some Predator dogs, and they got like fully automatic weapons and not missile launchers, but like grenade launchers and stuff like that. And while it's not far off to say that military personnel would have this, it's just the fact of, I really question of how much stuff they would have let him have in his house, especially since later in the movie they say that he had a past of PTSD. So I don't really think they would allow stuff like that for him to carry. So that was kind of an essence where it's like, I mean, they kind of needed it because of how powerful the Predators are in this, but at the same time, it was like, that wasn't really explained very well. After they get some more occurrences with the military personnel that they are eventually being chased after, like that it makes sense because they could just take the weapons off there. But that was just a little thing that I noticed that was just kind of like, what? Speaking of the Predator dogs, they took this concept from the Predators movie that came out in like 2013 or something like that. And I initially was looking forward to this because I did like that aspect in that other movie. But the design of the Predator dogs, I just thought it was a little stupid. Or maybe not stupid, but just kind of like one of those things where it seemed a little unbelievable. Because the Predator dogs look a lot like the Predators. And I just thought it was like the only reason why they looked so much like the Predators was mainly just because probably somebody was like, hey, wouldn't that be funny if we made them look like the Predator? And I was just like, I liked the design of the ones in the other because they looked alien, but they didn't look like the Predators. You know, they looked like just something that, you know, maybe they captured from a different planet or was possibly indigenous to their planet. But I mean, I know that a lot of people say like, well, that's just to convey like them looking like like they came from the Predator world. But I don't know, like you could say the same concept where it's like, you know, on Earth, do dogs look like people? No, not really. There's nothing that that's like similar. I mean, I guess you could say like their hair in some ways, but I don't know. It's just one of those things I found an odd design choice. Which getting into kind of the look of Predator, since we're on the topic, the CGI in areas is great, and sometimes it's awful. Like for instance, with the standard Predator, the fugitive Predator, he's like a normal Predator, and so he's a little bit taller than like the average human, but you know, not towering. And so they were able to use a lot of practical effects and then just do like CGI like around the face. And I thought that looked good. I thought it looked pretty great. But when it got to the Predator dogs and the hybrid Predator, and the hybrid Predator is supposed to be like an 11-foot tall Predator, that's when there's moments of those that the CGI looks bad, like really bad. But it's only for like certain parts, and it's really weird. It was almost like the resolution went down, or it just turned pixelated at a couple times. It was just really weird, and I thought it was like, how did they miss that? You know, because it looked, and I was also just really dumbfounded because like some parts it looked great, and other parts it looked like crap. But I don't know what was going on, but it was a little disappointing to see that in some instances, and I'll straight up tell you, it took me out of the moment a couple times. Now, one of the other things about the Predators that I thought was just, I don't know, it's a movie, it's a Hollywood thing, but you know, the Predators, especially in previous movies, they're depicted as a very smart and capable hunter. And they don't have a problem killing, and they're very efficient at it. In this movie, again, it's really hit and miss. There's times where the Predator feels like he's smart and calculated, but and there's a word here I wanted to use. Well, I guess I used it. Smart, but then there's other times where he just comes across as completely incompetent. Like there's time, like for instance, when he's waking up. And there's a scene where he's waking up off of the table in the government facility, and he's just mowing down people and soldiers, scientists, without even a second breath. And it's freaking badass. And he's doing it all without his gear. You know, he's just using his claws and like the people around him and shit. And it looks really cool. And it goes to show how just proficient they are at killing. And even at the beginning of the film where he's, when he first encounters the main guy, he's really good at taking out the other people in the area. But then there's times where he's breaking out of the facility after he's got all his gear, and he's going up against the soldiers head on, and it just seemed inconsistent. I don't know. I guess it was, to me, it seemed like the main cast got a special treatment for believability in the middle part of the movie. And it just kind of was like, it doesn't make any sense why the Predator would all of a sudden start missing his shots or, stumbling over or whatever. They kind of make up for this towards the ending, but I'll save that for a little bit later. There's also another thing where it goes back to the plot where they're talking about how we think the Predators are upgrading themselves because they're taking the top specimens of each species out of the planets they visit. But it was said by the chick that was just introduced to what was going on. Like, she literally had no prior information until that day. And then she's just looking at a sample of their DNA, and she's able to understand or know what their purpose was, or how I was like, how did you even know that from one isolated instance? The only thing you have to go on is their DNA and what's going on around right now. And I mean, I'm no biologist, but I'm pretty sure if you were looking at a DNA strand, the only thing that you'd be able to tell is that this one's alien and there's this little part that's human. I don't think out of this huge section of alien DNA you'd be able to decipher which one is inherently Predator and then which one's other subspecies of aliens. You know what I mean? I don't know. I could be wrong, but it was just another thing that I was just found really weird. And for her to say it in such confidence, it was a definite thing. They were blatantly telling the audience, yeah, this is what's going on, instead of her just speculating. I don't know. I think that scene could have been a little bit better if they just played it off as that was her best bet. Oh, yes. This other thing that came up, there is the Predator dogs, like I mentioned, they're used only really once as a group in one scene, and then for some reason, I don't get what happened, but all of a sudden there's one Predator dog that's just I want you to be my master. And it goes up to the humans, and it becomes a plot device to take down the bigger Predator. Which, I don't know, it was just one of those things where they're like, can we keep it? And they're like, yeah, we can keep it, I can study it, and then it'll be a helpful hour or whatever. But I don't know, it just didn't make any sense to me, because if you know any dogs that people use for hunting, they got those things trained down, to the T. They take commands and they'll do whatever their master says. So it just seemed really weird that it disobeyed, killing them, or it came off and was like, hey, I'm just gonna be a puppy. I don't know. It was just weird. I mean, you wouldn't see a trained hunting dog, licking a frickin' duck. I don't know. It was just weird. The other thing was, now this is actually a positive that I wanted to say. There is a scene where the hybrid Predator is going through a house, and I freaking loved this scene. I thought it was really brutal, and I think it showed really well just how overpowering the Predators can be. There's also a lot of other scenes too, when it's breaking out of the facility. Like I said, there's some parts of that where it gets a little iffy, but especially towards the beginning part of him breaking out, there are some really cool shots of him just mowing people down. And savagely too, if I do say so. So those parts were really cool. So there is some really good action parts with the Predator. But with that being said though, they don't really try to, hide the Predator in any way. They blatantly show you in the first minute or so, and I get why, because Predator's so well known. It's such a well known franchise that they weren't trying to reintroduce you. They weren't trying to have that thriller horror type vibe. They were just trying to have more of a action take, which I will say that compared to another action take on the Predator, like Alien versus Predator or AVP, it was better than that. So I will give it props for that. There's a couple of other things. I don't know how much longer I want to go, but I'll just go ahead and keep going. There's another scene towards the later part of the movie that the military guy, I can't remember his name, he takes the sun, and because the sun apparently knows where the spacecraft that the fugitive Predator brought for the humans to have is going to be, and so he takes them there because apparently the kid figured out how to read Predator, and so he takes them in there. The dad, which our main guy, and then his group of soldiers actually get in there, and he uses the cloaking device to sneak in on the ship and take out the government dude's guards, and then he proceeds to walk out of the ship uncloaked, and he was like, yeah, you're going to tell them to put all the guns down on the ground, or, you know, you're going to let them walk out of here, or I'm going to, like, shoot your brains through your mouth hole. And it was just like, I was like, okay, this is fine, but I was just like, if he was able to so sneakily sneak onto the ship unnoticed, how come he couldn't have just, because keep in mind, like, not just himself, but his weapon that he was holding and everything was cloaked, so I just don't understand how he didn't make it look like the son was walking next to the guy and just had him, like, in between, just held, like, the gun, like, right to his face, and he's like, dude, we're gonna walk out of here like it's nothing. You're gonna tell people walking out, I'm just getting some fresh air or something, and we're just gonna stroll right out of this thing. And I don't know why to me, I think that makes more sense, but I don't know. It was another missed opportunity, I think, or maybe the writers just didn't think that, or maybe there's no thrill in that. I don't know. You could have made something pop off, but like the other Predator come in and just freaking blow that guy up or something right next to him. I don't know. But it was another thing that kind of bothered me. Oh, a big thing that I actually saw when I was watching somebody react to the trailers is there was a moment where they show the guy from Game of Thrones. Crap, I can't remember. I can't remember his name on Game of Thrones. I'm sorry, but you'll know him. He has a scene in the trailer where he has the plasma caster's red dots on his face. And I know a lot of people are like, oh man, did they just show his death? Or is this like one of those things that's going to be like a fake out? And like, no, they flat out didn't hide that at all. Like, his death is like exactly that scene. Now, granted, he kind of dies off camera. He gets hit by the plasma caster, but it's not, I don't know. It's one of those things where it, like, Carl weathered them, where it took off his arm and then he just, I guess, fell or something. I don't know. But I was a little disappointed that they showed that in the trailer, because when I saw that scene coming, I recognized it from the trailer and there was no suspense behind it. And I was like, oh, are they going to do something different? He's going to be able to, like, jump down and, like, miss it, or, you know, and no, it didn't end up being the case. Now, one of the other things that was pretty cool that I thought was the hybrid Predator had this new weapon. There was actually a couple different weapons for the Predator that I thought was pretty cool. I think we've seen them in some of the games and maybe some of the comics where the Predator has, like, its rope weapon where it can use it, and it's kind of like a fiber wire, but also, like, really sharp to where it can just cut. Like, there's this one scene where he throws it and it latches into a wall, and, like, there's a truck coming by and they just slices off their heads. And I really was glad to see that weapon, because it's a really cool weapon. It's probably my second favorite weapon of the Predators, besides, like, their staff. And so, but the plasma casters are pretty cool too. But anyway, there was that I found really cool. Oh yeah, there's a couple of other things. Like, for instance, okay, there's a final fight, which, as a plot thing, I don't know, it makes sense into their plot, but as much as I don't think their plot really makes sense, I still found it a problem where the Predator ends up getting into the ship that was supposedly not meant for mankind, or was meant for mankind, but he wants to foil them not getting, and he's getting ready to blow it up, and he's like, he sends a message, and they have, like, a translator device where they're able to understand him, and he's like, I want to fight the main guy because I think you're the only true warrior here, and I'll give you a head start to prepare for battle or whatever, and you'll be my prize if I end up winning. And so it's like, oh, okay. And so I don't know, it was like one of those things where there were so many already garbage plot lines that I was just like, okay, whatever. It is what it is. But I don't know. It just didn't sit well with me. But anyway, there's also a scene in that scene where he's going after them where there's parts of it that I liked and there was parts of it that I didn't like. I think, getting back to what I said earlier, there's a part of this where he's just mowing down people. And I think even like the main people that we'd seen throughout the whole movie. And I like this because it was like the first scene in the movie that we actually got main characters that were super vulnerable, and it felt like they weren't untouchable for the sake of the plot. You know what I mean? So it was really rewarding seeing the final fight. There was one dude though, like the main government guy, he gets like his head blown off by the own cannon that he has on his shoulder, and it's like, I mean, yeah. I mean, there is some good depth there. There's some good action, and I think they did it well. Because I don't typically like scenes that are shot completely in the dark because it's just too dark and you can't really see what's going on. In this movie, I thought they did better with that because you can see more of what's going on. And this does help because of, the predators having the masks where you can see multiple fields of vision. But where they kind of screwed up on that is the hybrid predator doesn't wear a mask at all throughout the whole movie. And they sometimes flash to a first-person perspective from the hybrid predator point of view, and it's the different fields of vision. I mean, the predator has a different field of vision. It's like the red with like the marks where it just senses heat. But but they're looking at it through like infrared or something. I don't remember what it's called, or the heat's vision. And it was like, I don't know, like it was like, I mean, Predator fans probably didn't pick that up, but people that have watched the other movies were probably like, ugh, because I know I sure was. I was shaking my head a little bit. But, one last thing that I'll say before I get into the very ending was the final fight is something that it's done well in the sense that it could happen. Like in the situation, like it wasn't like something that was completely unfathomable. Like it was, like for instance, it wasn't the main dude just beating this hybrid predator's ass all over the place, because there was no way that I would believe that. Because I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't able to do that with the regular predator, even with how muscular and fit he was. I would have left the theater if this guy did that to this. So I was glad to see they didn't go that route. They actually had everybody working together to whittle him down, to make him weaker, and then finally able to kill him. And they actually did it in a way that I think was the best way to kill him off in this. But at the same time, it balances on like so many like what ifs, like if everything had to align, like all the planets had to align in one single constellation in order for this thing to even have happened, because like it has the dog doing something, it has his kid doing something, it has him doing something, it has the scientist Olivia Munn doing something. Like it's like everything had to align perfectly. But I will say, out of the scene that they were given and everything, I think it was still an enjoyable watch to like the end fight. Now, the only thing I'll say before I get into final thoughts and rating was the ending. I don't know how I feel about this ending. Because, I mean, it's pretty common with movies nowadays where they'll try to set it up for sequels and, its own universe and stuff like that. Which, the Predator doesn't really need to do that because it's already a big enough property. But I guess they felt the need to. So, at the very end, they figure out that the package that the fugitive predator left for them actually ended up surviving. He had it set up to where the capsule shot out right before the ship self-destruct, and government actually found it and got it in their possession. And they figure out that it's like a suit. It's like a Iron Man, Terminator-esque looking suit with a predator mask for a helmet. It was really, I mean, I'll tell you what, it looked cool, but the CGI was so bad on it that I was like, ooh. But, yeah. So, and then, it basically has that line where the guy's like, that's my suit, I'm going to go after these SOBs, or something to that effect. And that mixed with, like, I guess his son, even though looks like he's freaking 7 years old, and like I said, he does have a disability. He's working for the government, and he's got like a desk job, and he's like sitting there tinkering with like the masks and stuff. I don't know. I just don't see the government ever doing that, even if you were some kind of, I don't know. It was really weird. And my final thoughts: this movie is, I think, a terrible Predator movie, but oddly enough, it's still a halfway decent movie in general, and especially for like a sci-fi movie, it's not too bad. It's one of those movies though that has a good chunk of humor in it. And I can say it feels a little overboard at times, for most of the time I would say, but it's still a good movie. I think for me, I think I'd have, I know you're going to freaking jump out of your seat when I say this, but I think it's a very, very low tier. I like it. It was just one of those things where, like it almost, and this is putting, I mean, like it's like this much of it not being, I can't believe it's not better, but I do have to put it up to the next one just because there is some aspects of it that I did like. I don't know though. It's pretty mediocre, and I will say if you're a Hard Time Predator fan, I think there's some parts that you could take away that are enjoyable, but for the most part, I would like, don't see it in theaters. I wouldn't even recommend buying or renting it. I would just maybe wait until it comes out on video and then looking up clips put on YouTube or something like that, because there's honestly only a handful of parts of the movie that I think are worthwhile for a diehard Predator fan. With that being said, if you're somebody that just wants, funny action sci-fi movie and you don't really care about the Predators at all, I'd say I think you could enjoy it. I think it'll really depend on how much you tend to analyze. If you tend to turn off your brain and just enjoy what's being shown you, I think you'll probably like it a lot better than I did. I think you'll even maybe say it was more of a worth it. But if you're somebody that, like me, even when I'm not doing stuff for like a video or whatever, I still tend to analyze things and try to see if it fits or if it makes sense, then I think you probably won't like this as much. But anyway, guys, that'll conclude this video on my discussion and light review of The Predator. Be sure to stay tuned as we got more content coming on the way, got more gaming stuff, as well as light novel and anime reviews, and we're going to try to keep it up. We are going to be reviewing Halloween when it comes out, and there's a few other movies that we'll probably go see in theaters, so if you're a movie buff, stay tuned for here because we got that content coming as well. But anyway, Addicts, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.